and it's perfect. I think you've done this once or twice before.
All right. Well, wonderful. Thank you, Laura. I'm going to do a little bit of a repeat. Obviously, today it's Laura and myself, and I'd like to thank you for joining us. The rest of the group is enjoying a beautiful fall day out there, and I'd like to thank Laura for inviting me. And like I said, we are running a full array of webinars throughout the month, always on Wednesdays. And we have just decided that we're going to be doing the UAS program every month coming up in our last meeting. And that obviously is growing by leaps and bounds. And we certainly encourage anyone that is interested in UAS or is a commercial drone operator to join us because we do have very good subject matter experts that are absolutely doing very interesting things out there in the drone world, presenting. And of course, Levi Eastlake, our chief pilot from the Bureau of Aeronautics in Wisconsin, is a Part 107 drone operator, and he does the training for the state patrol pilots. He leads this program, so we're super excited to have him running that program. So, not to keep droning on what we have to offer, today's objective is we're going to be talking about proficiency flying, and we are going to take that from a different standpoint. I'm going to show you some Wisconsin statistics. I'm going to talk about erosion of skills, the tools that are available at your disposal, and of course, the wings activities. We are really pushing the wings activities because they are your personal training program that the FAA has worked out that really emulates what we did in the airlines when I flew for them with the simulator sessions and also in conjunction with the aircraft working together. So, this morning, why are we here? Well, on a beautiful Saturday morning, I do not want to be wasting your time, but I want to talk about the three things that I've seen over the last 15 years being at the FAA on accidents and incidents. And I can tell you over and over again, the three most common problems that I see leading to accidents is complacency, lack of proficiency, and lack of standard operating practices. So what is that? Well, obviously, lack of proficiency comes in the view and is a problem when we have had periods of prolonged inactivity. And most of you probably do not suffer from that issue since we are just coming off the summer flying season. That usually is a problem very early in spring when we have people who haven't flown during the winter months up in the northern part of the US. And they go out there and get into their airplane without getting together with their flight instructor and having them go along to do a few lessons that need to be done. And that's where we see these big spike in accidents in the early spring month. Complacency is very interesting, and that seems to be happening in the time era that we're in right now. In other words, that August, September, October time period, we see a spike in accidents again in the fall time. And that is due to folks being so comfortable having flown all summer long that they are becoming complacent not only on the pre-flight action, but also not paying attention to detail, such as what we're seeing over and over again is really complacent on aircraft control during landing and approach phase, and then ending up going off the runway. I mean, we're seeing that over and over again. What is standard operating practices? It's a big terminology that we use in the airlines continuously, in that it is doing things the same way each and every time. That is such a problem out there with general aviation because what I'm talking about is many people have not gone through a prolonged, very structured training program, and it is very difficult for them to establish a standard operating practices if they don't write themselves a checklist that gets them to adhere to the same program over and over again every time they go out flying, getting prepared for that flight. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a later program here so that you can associate with that. But before we get started, I want to show you the statistics. Statistics to me can be very skewed. And to me, I keep it very, very simplistic in that I look at raw numbers. And more so importantly, I look at these raw numbers as what is the trend? Are we going the wrong way? Are we going to make really better headway? And as you can see, the trend from 2017, when I took over as the FAASTeam program manager, when we look at the totals, we can see that we had a lot of accidents and incidents in Wisconsin. In 2017, 81 total. So what is the difference between an accident and an incident? Defined by the FAA, an accident is when the aircraft is no longer flyable. So what I'm talking about is a bent spar. That would be considered an accident. An incident, however, is where there's less traumatic problems with the aircraft being totally obliterated. Obviously, it is something like, as an example, would be blown out tire, and the aircraft went off the runway because of a hard landing, as an example. And so my point being is, again, I always say the folks who had an incident were lucky, and it did not cause traumatic injury either. However, I look at it, it's luck. Rather, that's why I put the two together in the totals, because to me, I take them just as seriously. As you can see, we had a market decrease in accidents and incidents over the years. And of course, if you wanted to really look good, I always say I should have retired in 2020 because we really were shining. But that's not really representative of what we were doing, but rather what was going on in the environment. Remember COVID. And as you could see in 2021, as people were coming out of COVID and going out flying, the accident rate really started to spike. And we topped out in 2022 and were able to bring it back down in 2023. And what happened in 24? Here we go again. Why that market spike? And I can tell you that general aviation seemed to be flourishing in 2024 like never before, as far as the number of aviation events that was going on, folks learning to fly, folks out there flying for pleasure. It was incredible. In Wisconsin, fuel sales were through the roof in 2024, and we've seen a decrease in that for 2025. Fuel sales are definitely lower. That means there's less people flying for fun. However, the flight schools have been going nonstop in the time period from 22 on through 25 here. And we have a big waiting list in Wisconsin for our 141 flight schools, as well as the flight centers. The FBOs have an incredible amount of interested people that are learning to fly. The good thing that we see in Wisconsin is instructor-led or dual aircraft accidents have been very, very low for us over the years. And I attribute that to our instructors doing a very good job overall. However, I can tell you we do an incredible amount of training and definitely letting folks know what's going on out there at the flight schools by me visiting them literally on a bi-monthly visit, and the bigger flight schools I'm there at least at least every other month, if not once a month, depending on the issues that we're seeing, and staying on top of it with the DPs, having the DPs continuously in touch with us at the FAA so that we can find if there's a new trend, if there is a problem out there in training. And I'll give you an example. Last year in 2024, we saw a big spike in folks not making it through their orals for the practical tests in aircraft systems and such. We also saw an incident that showed that the student pilot did not understand, as an example, what Laura just put on the pre-webinar, and it was called the carb heat, the carb ice issue, where they understood what carb heat really was. They had no idea, and they never tried carburetor heat on, and that was exactly the problem with carb ice having formed that day during a student pilot solo operation. And so what we did with that is we did a three webinar series on aircraft systems with one of my safety reps that's an AMP-IA as well as an ATP. And we did those during the pro tips for CFIs and students in October. And we recorded them and obviously had Laura put them on her YouTube channel. And then I took them to all the flight schools and flight centers and asked every CFI to be watching this and having the chief flight instructors at these flight schools then query the CFIs to make sure that everyone was on the same page, that they understood their aircraft systems in order for them to then obviously to let the students know. And we also told them, let your students watch this, because that way we have obviously trained it. And then I would be checking with them and making sure that the DPs would record and report any student that came in that was not doing a thorough aircraft systems knowledge during a practical test, that I would be following up with that student pilot as well as the instructor to make sure that we got that quality under control again. So that's how we manage that program, and it's been helpful to us to really keep the pulse on GA, and that has been changing over time. We're seeing a big degradation in knowledge with our folks at the flight schools simply because the experienced flight instructors are no longer out there in industry teaching. They have been going to the airlines, they have retired, and so we have been trying to fill that void by really working with the flight schools, with the flight instructors themselves through workshops as well as briefings that we continuously do. And most importantly, what we're doing today is letting them know through what we're doing here in a briefing. Now, you fully understand that a seminar or a webinar as we're doing today, the retention of knowledge is quite low if we measure that. So really the big thing that what we all learned is you learn the most by doing. And so we make sure that we put that into practice. And that's one thing that I keep saying about these webinars and seminars as you're joining me today, is that it is a combined knowledge and skill that makes a safer pilot. You being here is only going to give you part of that knowledge basis, and you will have to go out there and continuously train in order to be a safe and competent pilot. As you can see, my statistics are literally just for Wisconsin. That's what I'm responsible for. So when you're looking at these numbers, they are just for Wisconsin. And as you can see, I put down the number of accidents and incidents, and it looks like I made a mistake there. In 2025, which was this past summer, we actually had 11 accident incidents in Wisconsin during AirVenture 2025. So that attributes quite a few numbers to us in Wisconsin. As you could see, it was up two from the year before. However, the great news that I have, I always say great, is we had no fatalities, knock on wood, in the last 12 months in Wisconsin. And that's really superb. I mean, that's one thing that I always look at. Hey, we do not want to have anyone lose their life in an aircraft. And we really work hard doing that. So, having said so, those are the things that I look at. Now, pilot deviations are usually precursors to what's going on out there to be followed up. And I can use an example. A pilot deviation is where a pilot does not follow air traffic control instructions or flies into airspace that they shouldn't have been in. And you can see that in 2023, we had 66 pilot deviations in Wisconsin. And take a look at 24. Obviously, an increase of 29% in accidents, incidents, and however, we only showed 40 pilot deviations. But that is a precursor that I can say over and over again that I've seen in the past being a problem. And the other thing too is our pilot deviations are all over the board, and that is because of the way we track these from a FAA standpoint. I can tell you that these numbers, again, are not really representative of the total number of deviations because we're using different databases to track them due to programs changing. So to me, I look at what kind of deviations they are, and that usually gets me going to be doing more seminars, future seminars with air traffic controllers being the main speakers with myself, as well as the webinars that we're putting on nationally through Pro Tips. And we are going to be doing one with Great Lakes Runway Safety with Jennifer Settle and myself here in December. And that's talking about hotspots being an issue out there. And we're going to be talking about airport signage, something that really is so elementary. All it takes is for somebody to actually sit down and spend some time looking at these issues. And by doing that, getting a good review of airport signage, which you can do on FAA.gov, which you can do through our FAASafety.gov website by going on courses and doing that. So to me, all the information is there. It's just simply taking the time and spending that time getting ready. So I want you to ask yourself, could this happen to me? This is an accident I'm going to talk about that occurred to a private pilot that was out there flying. And I can say honestly that sure, it could happen to anyone who flies aircraft. Now, how this happens is a big mystery. In the complex situation that we are usually confronted is it a pilot problem or is it a mechanical problem? This aircraft here was involved in an accident where the pilot went out flying with his wife, ended up in Burlington, Wisconsin, and they were out getting fuel in Burlington. Burlington has some of the lower fuel prices, and it's a mecca for people to come in and sell fuel and go from there. Now, this pilot elected to do this on a very high density altitude day. In other words, it was a hot, muggy day, and they filled the tanks to the tab. In other words, they filled both tanks, total fuel capacity of the aircraft. They ended up, instead of using the long blacktop runway, the pilot decided to do an intersection departure on the shorter grass strip. Number two problem, right? So here we've got a full aircraft, full fuel. We've got a shorter runway that's unimproved grass strip, and then not even utilizing all of the runway. lots and lots of issues. And we haven't even talked about, did the pilot ever do the correct pre-flight actions, such as performance, knowing what the performance of that aircraft is for that day, because we've all been flying aircraft, whether during the winter time when it's 0 degrees versus 85 degrees with a temperature dew point spread of very little and having a high density altitude situation, we know that aircraft performance is extremely different for that. And of course, this pilot here even took off with the wrong flap setting. So when you can compound a problem like that, you really see how this can end up in an accident. So what the pilot did is not use the full runway, and of course, going down that grass strip, realizing that this airplane was not accelerating at the rate he was expecting. And then what he did is horse the airplane off the runway. He flew it in ground effect to gain speed. And then he pulled the aircraft up, made it over the first line of trees on the south end of the field. And then, of course, the aircraft started to settle right back in. The performance wasn't there. He stalled the aircraft into what occurred here is he ended up in the back of a housing development and ended up crashing the airplane. Now, an accident like this, you would think people would be ending up fatally injured. They actually both survived. They ended up going to the hospital, of course, but both of them ended up being okay. So that the outcome obviously was good. The airplane was totally destroyed in this accident. And this was a perfect example of an aircraft accident that is totally, totally avoidable. All human error, all not really paying attention to standard operating practice as we discussed earlier. Had this pilot done the performance with this aircraft and found out the performance numbers for that day, obviously he would have elected to use the blacktop runway. Instead of topping off the fuel tanks, he probably would have gone with less than full fuel, meaning half tanks of fuel, because all they were doing is pleasure flying. They weren't going anywhere. They didn't need full tanks. There was just no pre-flight action whatsoever. And then, of course, making the airplane do what it wasn't designed to do certainly didn't help either. So, to me, this is a perfect example of lack of training, lack of standard operating procedures, and pre-flight action was not accomplished. Totally avoidable. Thank God they didn't get killed. However, as you can see, it could have killed those folks as well as people on the ground, and it was totally avoidable. So here's an example of an aircraft that was in good shape that ended up being totaled. And what we did with this pilot, we put him through a lot of remedial training, just as much ground as flight training before they were able to go back out and fly again. This accident here happened during a soft field takeoff at a small airport on a grass strip, and this was in Brodhead, Wisconsin. This pilot came in from Michigan for a pancake breakfast. And what happened is during takeoff, the pilot did not utilize the correct procedures for a soft field takeoff. And instead of using rudder on takeoff to maintain straightaway down that grass strip, he ended up using the ailerons, and the aircraft wing dipped, and obviously the airplane ended up crashing because that wing touched the grass and it spun the airplane. This pilot here again, self-insured airplane, pretty much ended up being demolished. He could not obviously afford to fix it back up. And this was another aircraft accident, totally avoidable due to lack of piloting skills having diminished. And this is something we're seeing all the time. As you can see, the first one we talked about knowledge and skill. This one here was simply skill, not maintaining proficiency, not understanding aerodynamics, understanding P-factor, gyroscopic precession, etc., on a soft field takeoff and losing control of the aircraft. So what I'm getting to you folks is this is it is a skill set that can be worked together through training. And that's where I'm going with this. So, what skills are gone? We talk about short-term layoffs will usually involve motor skills. Long-term absences will require both knowledge and motor skills. In other words, ground school and flight training. And that's something that for those folks who haven't been flying for a couple of years, they need to get back in the books, get together with a flight instructor, and pretty much find a instructor that has the currency and knowledge of the aircraft if they own their own airplane so that they are comfortable giving dual for somebody who isn't up to speed in that aircraft. That's something, again, that if you're flying an aircraft that there aren't thousands of airplanes out there in that kind of make and model type of deal, where it's a specialty airplane, it's very difficult to find an instructor that is competent and current in that type of airplane. I think about our tail draggers. A lot of people love tail draggers, but there are not that many instructors who are really competent and really understand uh, giving dual in a tail dragger aircraft. So that's something that you, again, have to do some homework. Obviously, knowing folks out there in industry is a wonderful thing. Type clubs are excellent sources. And then, of course, our alphabet groups, including EAA, AOPA, NAFI. All of those programs are excellent, helping you find that instructor that is competent and current in the aircraft. So the question that we have to ask ourselves is, how long has it been since you last flew with your instructor? For many, many people that I've seen in these accidents, it's the last time they had a flight review. That's the last time they were out there training with an instructor, and that is a problem. So, how do we do this? How do you stay in tune with where you really are? Well, again, numbers do tell a lot. When's the last time you tracked your flight hours? Do you have any idea what you're flying a year? What's the last 6 months? What are the last 12 months? What are the last 24 months of your flight time that you've had? If you're like me, I haven't flown a whole lot since the airlines, and simply because with the type of job that I have, I am continuously on the road doing seminars and webinars like we do today, and I haven't had that chance to really stay proficient at all. I might be current, but I'm certainly not proficient. And so the question is, how many hours do you fly? The average general aviation pilot in Wisconsin flies anywhere from 15 to 25 hours a year. That's not a lot if you think about it, because when you look at those numbers, when you were a student pilot, you were flying a whole lot more hours because that's the only way that you could progress because you were both current and proficient. Do you communicate with your instructor, or is it, well, you're only going to talk to them every 2 years because you need a flight review? When was the last time you had your conversation with them? So what I'm talking about is conversation of sitting down with your instructor and talking about, hey, I need to go back out there with you because I noticed that my crosswind landings, I know, Laura, here you go. you're going to talk about landings. Absolutely, I talk about landings because that's where we see 70% of our incidents and accidents over the last couple of years being in that area by being the causal factor of our accidents and incidents. So, if you are very weak in crosswind landings, that is a perfect area that you need to go and talk to your instructor and set up a couple of lessons in a row to get you back on speed. And I can tell you over and over again, poor landings are the result of unstabilized approaches. You need to work on that approach to landing all the way in on final being stabilized. That aircraft has to be on speed, on altitude, and on track for the center line of that runway. If one or two of those things are out of whack, you are not going to get a good landing. You might even have an excursion because you were that far off. So you need to work with your instructor, get out there in a pilot controlled field where you can concentrate on flying the full traffic pattern with your instructor to get back in the rhythm. I keep saying over and over again, flying the full traffic pattern is so important so that you can get yourself back into standard operating procedures of where to run the checklist, where to put on the flaps, and getting your approach speed to where it needs to be with that aircraft. That is such a big deal. These airplanes are made to fly, and if your approach speed is even 5 knots fast, that airplane is going to burn up a lot of runway before it's ready to land. And you pushing that nose over is not going to end up well for you because you might end up with that nose gear collapsing and the airplane ending up getting wrecked. So that's one of the things that we see. The same thing again is running out of a runway because you were way too fast and you didn't make that decision to go around. Go around procedures should be as comfortable as you do in a pre-flight. You need to practice them over and over again. And I can tell you that many pilots do not do go-arounds during their flight time in between flight reviews because they're not spending enough time doing those. When it does happen, they're all up in arms and the airplane ends up being destabilized. And oftentimes their rudder control isn't there and they end up losing control of the airplane. So, do you work with different instructors? We all love working with the same people that we're accustomed to because it's comfortable for us. I encourage my folks in Wisconsin to seek out different instructors simply because every instructor has their strength and weakness. And to me, you are a result of your instructor's weakness coming out in you if that's the only person you ever trained with and got checked with during your flight reviews, where they actually did the evaluation of your skills. And to me, different instructors will point those out to you. I think it is imperative that you go out there with different instructors and seek those professionals out that really are paying attention, that understand what instruction is all about and evaluation is all about. That's the big thing that I see. Now, the last ones that I'm going to talk about is review of your knowledge. This is something that I keep saying over and over again that I see in our accidents is that our pilots do not understand their aircraft systems as well as they should or not at all, and they don't understand the limitations of their aircraft. In other words, do they understand the V speeds? Do they have them memorized where if I ask for best glide or best rate of climb, or ask them, hey, what would you use in a short field takeoff, best rate or best angle of climb? Those things are imperative that we have those numbers cold, that we understand them, because you can't look them up when the time comes. They should be right there every time, and understanding that if you do exceed a limitation on your aircraft, you will pay for it one way or another sooner or later, with that part of the aircraft having issues, being wore out, or even resulting in an accident, which is what we're going to talk about next Wednesday with our pro tips for CFIs and students, where the limitation of an aircraft was exceeded repeatedly, causing a very drastic accident several years back, taking the lives of two people. Do you own your own aircraft? That's a big one. In the context, if you do own your own aircraft, you are responsible for maintaining the records, understanding what is required for that aircraft to be legal, and squawking anything that is not working correctly the proper way and getting it fixed. Is it a equipment that can be squawked and flown, where the aircraft can be flown legally, or is it equipment that cannot be squawked and inoperative, and you end up having to have a ferry permit to take it to your mechanic, or have your mechanic come over at your airport and fix that inoperative equipment? That is a huge deal. So, as I talked to you before, um, flying is a perishable skill. And what I'm talking about again is, just because you're legal doesn't make you proficient to where you're safe and ready to go out. So, proficiency flying is a lot of fun because you're maintaining that proficiency to where you're comfortable going out flying. And I can tell you, many of the pilots I talk to are uncomfortable taking an aircraft from A to B because they're not proficient. So one way to get back into proficiency is obviously adding a new certificate or rating. And that again requires a lot of time, money, and devotion to getting yourself up to speed. Or you can do a wings phase. And I'm going to talk about wings here for a few minutes because I do believe it's a really great program that the FAA offers. It is your personalized pilot training program. And statistically, I can show you that the folks that are my accidents, incident statistics are not participating in the wings program. They are the folks that go to see a flight instructor for a short flight review every 2 years and think that's good enough. And I can tell you over and over again, if a professional pilot, whether they fly charter aircraft or are in the airlines, have to go out there every 6 months to a simulator program where they are training and working on abnormal and emergency procedures, then how can somebody like myself that flies less than 15 hours a year think that we're proficient and that have been training or lack of training stayed up on these issues? Now, having said so, to me, the Wings program has to be interactive and fun because that's why we're flying. We are flying for fun. We're not getting paid to do this, so we have to enjoy it. And to me, your instructor can make it fun by him or her being very organized. Having a written plan of action is a must. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that as we look at one of these flight activities on FAASTeam.gov, that, hey, there's a written checklist for us to take along to go out there and review the maneuvers. The one thing that this does is it can help you if you're an aircraft owner by saving some money by going to your broker, insurance broker, and telling them, hey, I've just finished a phase of wings through FAASTeam.gov in the last 12 months. You can have a written where you take that and show them the certificate so that you have proof of it. And having done a basic phase of wings will actually suffice as a flight review. So, what are the FAA Wings credit? Well, there are three levels of credit. The basic is the one that you have to start with. You cannot go to the advanced or master wings until you have completed a full set of basic wings. Once you've done that, then you can move on. So the way I equate these three levels of understanding is simply if you're a private pilot, the basic wings is for you. If you are a private pilot with an instrument rating, I would go ahead, finish the basic wings first, and then do the advanced. That's talking about instrument flying, etc. The master wings are for those folks who have a commercial pilot certificate or airline transport pilot certificate. And to me, they're also for our CFIs. So there are so many programs with basic and advanced. Oftentimes, I find it just beneficial to stay with those to help out. And again, staying current and proficient is where the fun starts. So, how do you get a basic wings? And it is made up of two different distinct categories. First of all, I talked about knowledge. The knowledge portion has to be for knowledge topic 1, 2, and 3, and I'm going to show that here in the next slide. That can be accomplished, the knowledge activity, through seminars, webinars, and FAA safety courses. So they are topic 1, 2, and 3, and I'm going to show those. These are all free. These are interactive courses. These are seminars attended to you through a FPM like myself, holding a seminar at your local airport, or you joining us today. You are going to get basic knowledge 3 on this program that I'm doing today. And you have to accomplish those within the 12 months period. That also includes your 3 flight activities that you must earn by going with your instructor to go out there and fly these activities. They can be both a combination of being in a simulator that's approved for flying training as well as the aircraft. I always say I like to see a combination of both. But again, if you have the aircraft available, you don't have access to a simulator that's approved, you certainly can do all of these 3 flight activities in the aircraft. So let me show you what that looks like. Here is a sample one of a knowledge. So I used a pilot that did not have access to a seminar. And so they actually went on FAASafety.gov. And as you can see, the course number is ALC-223. And that gave them basic knowledge topic 1. They also went on FAASafety.gov for ALC 155, and they did line up and wait, and that gave them basic knowledge topic 2. And you could see for the airspace one, they also did a course giving them basic knowledge topic 3. So that's what you're looking for is topic 1, topic 2, and topic 3 for the knowledge side. Now, the flight activity, remember this is just like a flight review. If you take a flight review and you literally cut it in thirds, this is what you get on these 3 flight activities. And when you look at that, every flight review, you should be doing takeoff, landings, and go-arounds. You should be doing slow flight stalls and basic instrument flying, which is under the hood. And you should have airport operations. That is a flight review in thirds. And as you could see, for you to get credit for flight activities, topic 1, 2, and 3 must be accomplished. If you do these flight activities in conjunction with knowledge activity within the 12-month period, you will get a certificate sent to you from the FAA that shows you have just completed the first phase of wings, that is perfectly acceptable as a flight review. And to me, what I'm really trying to show you folks is this. Rather than spending a couple of weeks sweating, getting ready for a flight review in your 24-month period, you can do this over a time period of 1 year, getting that knowledge and skill working together by going out there and spending time with your instructor. Now, oftentimes I get pushback from pilots saying, Jurg, the problem that I see with this is not only is it a lot of work, but it's more expensive than going out to do a flight review. And you can go either way with that in the context that when you do this every year, not only are you staying proficient where it's more fun flying because you're actually on top of your knowledge and skill set, and more importantly, you are a safer pilot. You also do not have to spend that energy trying to get back up to speed during a flight review. Remember that these flight activities, just like a flight review, have to be where the instructor evaluates you that you possess the skill set and knowledge to fly the aircraft safely. It is an evaluation. No, it's not a check ride, your flight review, nor is a flight activity a check ride. That's not what it is. It's an evaluation. But if your instructor has to continuously help you. Let's use a slow flight as an example where they're constantly coaching you, say, hey, watch your airspeed, you're going to stall. Watch your altitude, you just lost 250 feet. Watch your attitude. Those are not helpful in that you are not getting a proper evaluation. You're getting dual here and you're really not up to speed. So your instructor shouldn't be giving you credit for that flight activity or that flight review for that matter. You need to be able to perform these maneuvers with you being competent to fly that airplane with the certificate and rating that you hold. That's something that we're seeing out there in industry where the instructors are spending way too much time coaching and not properly evaluating. That is a huge problem out there. And simply put, you should know that if you've gone into a flight review or a flight activity and they were continuously coaching you through it, you really aren't on speed and you aren't ready to go out there on your own, that you really need to repeat that flight activity or flight review again until you can fly that airplane to the certificate and rating that you hold. So, in short, I'm going to stop share. I am going to go ahead and put you on the FAASTeam.gov. And all I wanted to show you, and Laura, let me know when you see my FAASTeam.gov side of it. Do you see it?
Now I do. It just popped up.
Excellent. What I really wanted to get to are two things. First of all, the homepage on FAASTeam.gov is where you go to find activities, courses, and seminars. And most of you obviously are working with Laura. You're up to speed with this simply because Laura spends time with this every year going over it. This is such a big deal that if you don't have an account, you wouldn't be on here today anyway because you wouldn't have gotten the invite. So we know you're one of those folks that knows what they're doing. If you go down to the middle of the page at Advisory Circular 6191K, along with the Wings Manual, really gives you a good rundown on what it is and how you get yourself set up on FAA Wings program. But also the big thing that I wanted to do is just take 2 minutes to show you with the activities of where you can get yourself into the Wings program. And all I wanted to do is show you flight 1, 2, and 3 as an example. And I wanted to show you that there's a laundry list of things that you can do right here. For example, let's take airplane single engine land, and we're going to go ahead and I'm going to show you the first one that I want to show you. Let's do airport operations for kicks. I click on that, and that is topic 3. And here is a big rundown of what the flight activity is about. But what I would do is I would make and grab that worksheet for that activity and take this to my instructor. And I say, this is what I want to be doing with you in the next flight for this wings activity, and take a look at it. I mean, the bold, dark items are the musts. You must do those to get credit for that wings flight activity. Obviously, you got to do a pre-flight procedure. That's a must, right? You're going to do a pre-flight assessment. You're going to do the flight deck management. You're going to do an engine start to taxiing, or you wouldn't get out there. And if you're at a Class D airport, you're going to do communications with the tower. You're going to fly the traffic pattern. Those are musts. Those must be accomplished to the certificate or rating you have. The other ones, again, are not required, but obviously you're going to take off and land, so they're going to give you credit for that. Now, once you've accomplished that, your CFI has 2 options. One is they can go on FAASafety.gov and give you direct credit if you have a current account, or if your instructor wants nothing to do with it, you can take this with their signature, scan it, email it to your FAASTeam program manager in your state, and they will give you credit for it. So what I'm getting at is this, folks, is if you haven't been getting credit, your FPM is very important to you in that they can go out there and give you credit for these activities. And I think the number one reason it's not really happening at the rate that we're expecting is because our flight instructors are not that comfortable with a flight activity, when in reality, it's simply a flight review divided into thirds. And to me, what I'd like to see you do is go out there with your instructor every 90 days during the flight periods of spring through fall. And then in winter, you get one flight period that you don't have to do, a 90-day period, and you go right back into it. And you do this in conjunction with safety courses and seminars, and you are up to speed. So Laura, with that, I'm going to give us 5 minutes.